The battle was at its peak. Earth's cities lay in ruins, and the world's defense forces were on the brink of collapse. The sky above was filled with smoke and the echoes of fire, as the alien fleet, led by the Krellians, continued to rain destruction down on humanity. Their ships were massive, powerful, and relentless. No one had expected the invaders to be so strong, so merciless. The moment seemed hopeless. Humanity's defenses were almost entirely destroyed, and the last remaining weapon, Earth's experimental fusion bomb, was the planet's only chance for survival. In a secure underground command center, General Holt stood before the team of engineers, her face hard with determination. She knew that this was the final gamble. There were no more plans, no more backup strategies. It was do or die. Holt looked around at the faces of the people who had fought so hard and sacrificed so much. Most of them were injured, exhausted, but still determined. These were the people who had helped design the weapon that might turn the tide. But now, as the countdown began, no one was sure if it would work. The Krellians had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt, but would Earth's last hope be enough? "Are we ready?" Holt asked, her voice low but filled with resolve. A young engineer, Emma Torres, was the one to answer. Her hands shook slightly as she stared at the monitors in front of her. She was responsible for the final stage of the weapon's activation. The weapon, an experimental fusion bomb, was designed to harness the energy of the Earth's core and unleash a powerful shockwave capable of destroying entire fleets. But the technology was new, untested, and dangerous. No one knew for sure if it would actually work. "We're ready, General," Emma said, though her voice lacked confidence. She hesitated for a moment, staring at the flickering countdown on the screen. "I hope," she trailed off. Holt nodded, not needing any further explanation. "Do it." As the final seconds ticked down, the tension was unbearable. The alien ships above Earth continued their bombardment, their weapons slicing through the atmosphere and tearing apart the planet's last defenses. Cities were reduced to rubble, and the cries of the people were drowned out by the explosions. Humanity's last line of defense was now a single weapon. If this failed, Earth would fall. 5, 4. Every person in the room held their breath as the countdown echoed through the chamber. Holt's heart raced. She had led armies in the past, but this felt different. This wasn't just about military strategy. It was about saving an entire world, an entire species. Earth had always been underestimated by the stars, but it was now fighting for survival. 3, 2. On the surface, the alien ships appeared to be mocking Earth's efforts. They didn't take humanity seriously, dismissing them as an unworthy adversary. They thought this final act of resistance would be futile. But the Krellians were wrong. 1. Now. At that moment, Emma hit the activation button, and the ground seemed to shake beneath them. The fusion bomb came to life. It was as if the Earth itself had roared in defiance. A brilliant beam of energy shot into the sky, colliding with the Krellian flagship. The shockwave was so powerful that it sent a tremor through the entire planet. The alien fleet paused, confused. For a brief moment, they hesitated, unsure of what had just happened. And then, in an instant, everything changed. The Krellian flagship, the heart of their invasion, exploded into a ball of fire and light. The shockwave rippled through the alien fleet, causing their ships to collide with each other. Some ships were torn apart, while others were sent spiraling out of control. It was like a scene from a nightmare, a display of power that the Krellians had never expected. For the first time, humanity had struck a blow against the invaders. The sound of the explosion echoed across the skies, and people on the ground felt a sense of hope rise inside them. Was this truly possible? Had Earth just won its first victory? "It's working," someone shouted in disbelief. It was as if no one could believe what they were seeing. The alien fleet was in disarray. Ships were retreating. The invaders, who had once seemed unbeatable, were now fleeing. Humans had shown them that they could be stopped. But Holt knew it wasn't over yet. The Krellians wouldn't give up so easily. They had underestimated humanity before, but now they would see the full force of Earth's will. Holt turned to Emma, her face filled with a mixture of relief and focus. "We have a chance, but we're not done yet," Holt said. "Prepare for the next phase. We got to finish this." But as the alien ships retreated, there was a new sense of determination in the hearts of humanity. The battle was not yet won, but the victory had sparked something deep within Earth's defenders. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for their freedom, their future, and their place in the universe. The Krellians had made a terrible mistake in underestimating humans, and now they would pay for it. As Earth's forces regrouped and prepared for the next phase of battle, the Krellians realized something they hadn't before. Humanity could not be broken. No matter how many obstacles they faced, no matter how many times they were knocked down, humans would rise again. And this time, they would not be defeated. In that moment, humanity's true strength was finally revealed. The Krellians had underestimated them, but Earth had proven them wrong. This was just the beginning of humanity's fight to protect their world. The alien invaders had learned the hard way. Never doubt the power of the human spirit. The atmosphere was heavy with tension as humanity faced its darkest hour. The alien armada, led by the Krellians, loomed large in the sky, casting a shadow over Earth. Cities were in flames, and the world's defenses were crumbling under the unrelenting assault. The Krellians, with their advanced weaponry and colossal ships, had made it clear. They were here to take Earth. The entire planet watched in dread as their future seemed uncertain. Yet amidst the chaos, there was a spark of hope. It wasn't in the form of any advanced technology or superior weaponry. It was the will of humanity, the determination to survive. General Holt and her team knew they had one final chance, one weapon that might turn the tide. A fusion bomb, a new, untested weapon that combined both Earth's resources and scraps of alien technology gathered from previous skirmishes. It was a desperate measure, but it was their only option. The scientists who had worked on it were unsure of its power, and the military was skeptical. If it didn't work, Earth would be wiped out without a second thought. The countdown to deploy the weapon began, but as each second passed, the situation grew bleaker. Alien ships continued to fire at the planet's remaining defense lines. Holt knew that every moment was critical. The bomb was designed to unleash a wave of destructive energy capable of disabling the Krellian fleet, but it had never been tested in battle. There was no guarantee it would succeed. As the timer ticked closer to zero, the world held its breath. In the command center, Emma Torres, a young engineer who had spent sleepless nights working on the weapon, stared at the control panel, her hands trembling. She knew this was her moment. This was the time to prove that humanity could fight back. "We have to do this," she whispered to herself. Finally, as the countdown reached its final moments, General Holt's command was clear. "Activate the bomb," she ordered. Emma hesitated for a split second, then pressed the button. The bomb's core hummed to life, a bright light flashing as energy coursed through it. The entire command center felt the power of the weapon activating. Holt's heart raced as the seconds dragged on. Then, with a sudden, powerful surge, the fusion bomb erupted into the sky, sending a massive pulse of energy toward the alien fleet. It was as if the Earth itself had answered the call. The shockwave hit the Krellian flagship first, and in an instant, the ship was torn apart in a blinding explosion. The sheer force of the blast sent shockwaves through space, damaging other ships in the fleet. The invaders, caught off guard by the unexpected power, hesitated. For the first time, the Krellians had been struck by something they couldn't understand. The alien fleet was thrown into chaos. Ships collided, others lost power, and some simply disappeared into the void. Earth's forces watched in stunned silence as the once mighty armada began to break apart. General Holt couldn't believe her eyes. It worked. The bomb had done the unthinkable. The Krellians, who had laughed at humanity's feeble defenses, were now retreating. Their fleet, once invincible, was in ruins. The tables had turned, but Holt knew it wasn't over. The Krellians wouldn't leave without a fight. They were a ruthless species, and they would return with everything they had. But for the first time in days, Earth had a reason to believe. They had shown the invaders that they could fight back. Humanity wasn't just a helpless species waiting to be wiped out. They were capable of great strength, of standing up against those who tried to destroy them. But even as the alien ships began to retreat, Holt's mind raced. The battle wasn't over. There would be more to face, more challenges ahead. Yet in this moment, humanity had proven something extraordinary to the galaxy. They had shown the invaders that underestimating the human spirit was a fatal mistake. Earth had not only fought back, they had won a battle no one thought they could win. And now, as the dust settled and the skies cleared, humanity stood at the beginning of something much larger. They were no longer the prey in the galaxy. The message was clear: humans would not go down without a fight. As the remaining alien ships pulled back into the dark void of space, a sense of victory rippled through the world. Humanity had made its stand, and won. The Krellians had learned the hard way that humanity's strength was not just in their weapons, but in their determination, their will to survive, and the ability to adapt when the odds were stacked against them. Earth had become a force to be reckoned with, and the galaxy was now aware that humans were not to be underestimated. The aftermath of the blast left the Earth in a strange silence, but within that silence was a new kind of tension. The Krellian fleet, once overwhelming in its numbers and firepower, was now fractured, scattered, and confused. General Holt watched the chaos unfold on the screens before her, the alien ships wobbling and falling out of formation. This wasn't just a victory. It was an eye-opening revelation. Humanity had done the impossible, and the universe had seen it firsthand. Despite the success of the fusion bomb, Holt understood the battle was far from over. The Krellians may have been stunned by Earth's sudden display of power, but they would not retreat for long. The alien empire was vast and ruthless, and the retreat was not a surrender. It was merely a tactical retreat to regroup and call for reinforcements. They had underestimated humanity before, but now they had learned a painful lesson. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was not defenseless. Humanity was a force to be reckoned with. While Holt's mind raced with the tactical realities of what needed to happen next, Emma Torres stood frozen, still processing the events that had just unfolded. She had watched as the fusion bomb's devastating power tore apart the heart of the Krellian fleet. But now, as the alien armada scattered and retreated, a strange feeling began to spread across the command room. Hope. For the first time, humanity had been able to fight back, not just survive, but win. Holt looked over at Torres, her voice calm but urgent. "Get the intel on the retreating ships. We need to understand what just happened and prepare for their next move." Emma nodded quickly, snapping out of her daze as she began to tap furiously at the control panel. A series of images appeared on the monitors, showing the alien fleet pulling back into the depths of space. Ships were damaged, some of them burning as they attempted to stabilize. It was clear the Krellians had been shaken, perhaps even terrified. Still, Holt knew that the real test was yet to come. They had bought Earth some time, but the question was, would it be enough? As Earth's forces scrambled to assess their options, the story of humanity's unexpected triumph spread like wildfire. News stations across the globe began to broadcast footage of the alien ships retreating, the once invincible armada falling apart. People in cities, devastated by the invasion, began to cheer. For the first time in what seemed like an eternity, there was a spark of joy, a glimmer of hope. But Holt couldn't afford to let her emotions get the better of her. She had seen what the Krellians were capable of, and she knew they would return in force. The aliens were proud, and their pride had been bruised. There would be no easy victory. The real fight was just beginning. Holt called a meeting with the other world leaders, military strategists, and scientists. They needed to understand the Krellians' weaknesses and exploit them. As the hours passed, Holt and her team worked tirelessly. Earth's defenses were still weak, and despite the victory, humanity had no illusions about their situation. The Krellians would come back, and next time, they would be ready. But for now, Earth had gained something far more valuable than a victory. They had gained something that could not be taken away: confidence. Across the planet, ordinary people began to rise to the occasion. People who had never fought a day in their lives now took up arms, helping to rebuild cities, defending their homes, and preparing for what was to come. It wasn't just the military that stood strong now. It was the whole world. Humanity had united in a way it had never done before. The Krellians had assumed that humans were just another fragile species to be conquered, but Earth had proved otherwise. The true power of humanity was not in their technology or their weapons. It wasn't in their ability to make advanced bombs or create new technologies. It was in their will, their determination to stand together, no matter the odds. It was in their refusal to accept defeat, no matter how hopeless the situation seemed. And this was something that no alien empire, no matter how powerful, could ever truly understand. As Holt and her team moved forward with the preparations for the next phase of the war, one thing was clear: Earth had become more than just a target. It had become a symbol of resistance. The Krellians had seen humanity's power, and now they would know that no matter what they threw at Earth, humanity would not break. Holt stood on the balcony of the command center, watching the skies where the last remnants of the Krellian fleet disappeared into the darkness of space. The war was far from over, but humanity had made its first stand. It was a moment of triumph, a moment that would be remembered for generations to come. For the first time, the aliens had learned what it meant to challenge humans. They had learned that humans could never be defeated. And this was just the beginning of a fight that would reshape the galaxy forever. The quiet that followed the victory was short-lived. Though the alien fleet had retreated, the Krellians were not ones to concede defeat easily. Earth had delivered a crushing blow, but Holt knew that this was only a temporary respite. The Krellians would be regrouping, strategizing, and soon they would return. The fear of further destruction hung heavy in the air, but Holt couldn't afford to let fear rule her. Instead, she focused on the task ahead: the rebuilding, the strategy, and the preparation for the next wave. As Earth's leaders came together in the war room, the atmosphere was charged with a mix of exhaustion and determination. The world had been on the brink of destruction, and yet, against all odds, humanity had won its first victory. But that victory came at a cost. Cities were reduced to rubble, entire populations were displaced, and the planet's infrastructure was shattered. People had fought hard, but the scars of war were everywhere. General Holt sat at the head of the table, her eyes focused on the holographic map before her. The Krellians, though retreating, had not left Earth's orbit. They were still watching. Holt knew they wouldn't be down for long. She could feel it in her gut. The Krellians had tasted defeat, and they would come back more determined than ever to wipe out humanity. She turned to her team, the people who had been by her side from the beginning, those who had helped turn the tide of the invasion. "We've bought ourselves some time," she said, her voice firm. "But we need to use it wisely. We can't afford to sit back and wait for them to regroup. We need to strike before they get the chance to build up their forces again. We need to learn from our victory." Holt's second-in-command, Colonel Reed, leaned forward. "General, we've detected Krellian reinforcements on their way. The first wave was just a scout, a testing of our defenses. This next wave, they'll be coming with everything they've got." Holt nodded. She had expected this, but she wasn't afraid. Humans weren't the same as before. The alien threat had made Earth unite in a way nothing else had. People who had never been allies were now working side by side to protect their homes. Nations that once fought amongst themselves were now putting aside their differences to defend the planet. Humanity had something the Krellians didn't: a fierce, unshakable will to survive. And now that humanity had tasted victory, they weren't about to let go without a fight. "We won't just defend this time," Holt said, her eyes burning with conviction. "We'll take the fight to them." The room fell silent, every leader, every strategist absorbing her words. The concept of a counter-offensive was risky, dangerous, and bold, but it was the only path forward. The Krellians had underestimated humanity once, and Holt was confident that they wouldn't make the same mistake again. But to strike first, they needed to know their enemy inside out. They needed to study every scrap of Krellian technology, every weakness, and every tactic the aliens had used in the past. They needed to turn the tables. Colonel Reed spoke up, his voice low but resolute. "We've got intel from their ships, communications, data, everything we need to start building a defense system that could take out their fleets before they get too close. The Krellians think they've got the upper hand, but if we use their own technology against them..." Holt smiled, her eyes lighting up. "Exactly. Let's show them that humans are not only capable of surviving, we're capable of outthinking them." The room erupted into a flurry of activity. The strategists and engineers began working at once, racing to decipher the alien data and adapt it to Earth's defense systems. New plans were drawn up, new weapons were developed, and in every corner of the world, humans were doing what they did best: adapting, innovating, and overcoming. Meanwhile, across the stars, the Krellian command center was in disarray. Their fleet had been beaten, and their pride had been shattered. The alien leaders, known for their ruthless pursuit of control, were furious. The thought of humanity, a species they had barely considered worth their time, had struck a devastating blow. The Krellian commanders could barely believe it. Their fleets were advanced, their weapons were powerful, yet they had been outwitted by humans, a species they had written off as primitive. "We will crush them," one of the Krellian commanders hissed, his voice low with anger. "This war isn't over. Earth will be ours. The humans will pay for their insolence." But the Krellians were no longer just facing an enemy with barely any defense. They were facing a planet united by a singular purpose: survival. And now, for the first time, humanity had the means to strike back, not just survive, but conquer. Holt knew this was just the beginning of a much larger battle. The Krellians were coming back, but this time, humanity was ready. The time for passive defense was over. Earth's forces were not just trying to protect their homes anymore. They were preparing for war on a scale the galaxy had never seen before. And as Holt looked at the maps of the alien fleet on her screen, she knew one thing for sure: they would not make the same mistake again. Humanity had learned, adapted, and now it was time to take the fight to the invaders. The war for Earth was far from over, but for the first time, humanity was not just defending. They were fighting for something more. They were fighting for their future, for the survival of their species, and most importantly, for the chance to prove that humans could never be wiped out. As the Krellian fleet prepared its counter-offensive, Earth prepared to take the fight back to them. It would be a battle that would determine the fate of the planet and the future of humanity itself. The universe would learn, the hard way, that when it came to humanity, underestimating them was always a fatal mistake. The war that followed Earth's counter-offensive was unlike anything the universe had ever witnessed. Humanity, once thought of as weak and insignificant, now stood as a symbol of resilience and defiance. The Krellian fleet, which had once dominated the stars, now found themselves struggling to maintain their grip on the galaxy. For the first time in centuries, a species had risen up to challenge their supremacy, and the Krellians were paying a heavy price for underestimating their opponent. General Holt's face was etched with exhaustion, but her resolve had never been stronger. The battles were intense, and each victory only spurred humanity to push further. Earth had harnessed the Krellian technology they had captured, retrofitting their own warships with alien tech that could turn the tide of any battle. New weapons were developed at breakneck speed, and soldiers trained harder than ever before. Humanity had become something more than just survivors. They had become hunters, striking back at the very force that sought to wipe them out. The Krellian Empire, once proud and invincible, now found itself on the defensive. Their ships, though still formidable, were no match for the ingenuity and sheer willpower of humanity. The tide of war was turning. The battle for Earth was not just a struggle for survival, it was a struggle for the very soul of the planet. Earth was no longer just another weak species. They were a force in their own right. The Krellians had underestimated humanity's capacity to adapt. They had thought that a few defeats would break the human spirit, but instead, they had ignited a fire that could not be extinguished. Holt and her team were relentless, and the battles they fought were not just to protect Earth. They were to ensure that no other species would ever underestimate humanity again. Meanwhile, back on Earth, people were no longer just watching from the sidelines. The entire world had rallied behind the war effort. Civilians were trained in new defense tactics, and entire cities were rebuilt with the aim of sustaining the war effort. Humanity's strength was no longer just in their ability to fight. It was in their ability to unite. In the heart of the conflict, a critical turning point arrived. Holt had received word that the Krellian fleet, desperate and bloodied, was preparing for their final assault. They intended to destroy Earth once and for all, to finish what they had started. But humanity was ready. Holt had one final card to play. Through their rapid technological advances, Earth's engineers had created something the Krellians could never have anticipated. A weapon capable of delivering an unprecedented blow to the alien armada. Holt had been planning this for weeks, knowing that this final battle could be their only chance to truly destroy the Krellian threat. The weapon, codenamed the Excalibur, was a massive orbital cannon that harnessed the power of the sun itself. It could obliterate entire fleets in a single strike. But it came with a risk. It required Earth's most powerful satellites to line up perfectly, a precise shot that had never been tested before. If it failed, humanity's last hope would be gone. With time running out, Holt and her team moved to deploy the weapon. But as they prepared for the final showdown, the Krellian fleet appeared in orbit, larger than ever, with reinforcements from across the galaxy. Their ships were lined up, ready to strike. This was it, the moment that would decide the fate of the Earth. The battle in the skies was fierce. Explosions rocked the space around Earth, and the sky above the planet was filled with the fiery trails of warships engaged in combat. Holt's strategy had worked. Earth's military forces were overwhelming the Krellian fleet. But the true test came when the Excalibur was finally prepared to fire. The cannon hummed with energy, a powerful pulse building within its core. Holt stood at the control center, watching the readouts, knowing that this was the moment of truth. The Krellian armada was closing in, their ships armed with devastating weapons. A single mistake could mean humanity's destruction. Holt steadied her breath, her fingers dancing over the controls, ensuring everything was aligned. Firing sequence initiated. The technician announced. Holt's heart pounded in her chest. She couldn't afford to miss. This was the moment that would either mark the end of humanity or its victory. Now, she commanded. The Excalibur fired. The massive beam of energy shot out of the cannon, hurtling toward the incoming Krellian ships. The beam hit the alien fleet with the force of 1,000 suns. The shockwave of destruction rippled across the vacuum of space, disintegrating ship after ship, reducing entire vessels to nothing more than dust. The Krellians never stood a chance. The weapon's power was beyond anything they had ever encountered, and in a single strike, the war was over. Victory was theirs. As the final remnants of the Krellian fleet burned in the atmosphere, Holt allowed herself a brief moment of relief. Earth had survived. Humanity had triumphed. And the lesson was clear. Never again would anyone doubt the strength of the human spirit. The Earth was scared, but it was alive. The battle had been won, but the cost had been high. Entire cities lay in ruin, and many lives had been lost. But in the grand scheme of things, the war had proved one undeniable truth. Humanity was not a species to be underestimated. For the first time, the galaxy would look at Earth with a new respect. Humanity had proven that, when pushed to the edge, they could rise up and fight back with the fury of a species that refused to be erased. And the Krellians had learned their lesson the hard way. Humanity was a force to be reckoned with. As the survivors celebrated their hard-earned victory, Holt stood looking out into the stars, knowing that this was only the beginning. There were still threats out there, still enemies who would dare challenge Earth. But humanity would be ready. After all, Earth had learned a vital lesson from this war. It wasn't the size of the enemy that mattered. It was the size of the will to survive. The celebration was short-lived. While humanity had won a monumental victory, the scars of war remained fresh, and the threat of further attacks lingered. The galaxy was vast, and who knew how many other species were watching Earth's rise? For now, the Krellians had been vanquished, but Holt knew that the peace would not last forever. Earth had just made its first mark in the interstellar community, and that alone made it a target for those who would see it burn. General Holt, standing in the war room with her trusted commanders, knew that the next chapter of humanity's story was yet to be written. Victory had come at a great cost, but the lessons learned were invaluable. Humanity had learned not only to survive, but to adapt, to innovate, and most importantly, to fight back. The Krellians had seen the human spirit once thought fragile, but now, the galaxy would remember Earth as a force to be reckoned with. As Earth began to rebuild, Holt reflected on the enormity of their victory. It wasn't just about defeating the Krellians. It was about showing the universe that Earth was no longer a defenseless planet. The events of the past weeks had set a precedent. The universe had learned that Earth would not be an easy target. Earth had risen from the ashes of destruction and stood tall, united in a way that no other species had ever seen before. There was no question now. Humanity was here to stay. But Holt's mind was not solely focused on the Krellians. Her gaze turned to the future, specifically to the question of what Earth would do next. As the remnants of the alien fleet were studied, new technologies were discovered, hidden deep within the wreckage. Humanity had proven its strength, but now it had the opportunity to become something more. These technologies could shape Earth's future in unimaginable ways, if humanity could harness them. The tables could turn once again in their favor. The galaxy was full of threats, but now Earth had a fighting chance. Months passed, and Earth gradually healed. New alliances were formed with other alien species, and technology exchanges began to open up. For the first time in history, humans were seen as equals by some of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. The humbling reality of Earth's place in the universe was evident, but humanity had something the galaxy couldn't ignore: a fighting spirit that no species could rival. As humans began exploring the stars, they carried with them the lessons of their victory, knowing that no matter the odds, they could rise again if they had to. General Holt, now regarded as one of humanity's greatest leaders, stood on the balcony overlooking the rebuilt city of New York. The war had ended, but the journey was just beginning. Holt had seen firsthand the potential of the human race, the sheer resilience that had driven them to victory. Now her focus was on preparing Earth for whatever would come next. The galaxy was a dangerous place, full of unknowns, but humanity had proven it could face those unknowns and emerge victorious. "We'll never stop fighting," Holt said softly to herself. As the wind blew through the city, she knew this wasn't the end. The universe had seen Earth's might, but it had also seen their resolve, their willingness to defend what was theirs. And if the galaxy hadn't learned that lesson yet, it soon would. As the sun set on the horizon, Earth's future was brighter than ever. The war with the Krellians had been brutal, but it had given humanity the strength to rise above. And as long as humanity held on to that strength, they would always be ready for whatever challenge the universe would throw their way. The universe would remember Earth. It would remember the species that was supposed to be weak, insignificant, and easy to destroy. But it would also remember the species that came back stronger after every defeat, who fought with a fire that could never be quenched.